Hey guys, welcome back to Fabscaped. In this video, we're going to be talking about making complex shapes, and this is part 4 in our little series of making complex shapes videos. Um, in this video, we're going to talk about align and distribute a little bit. We already talked about arranging a little bit and snapping, and we'll introduce this sort of object to path thing. In the past couple of videos, we've been talking about how do I take different shapes and actually combine them to make more complex geometries. How do I do that? And we talked about merging and subtracting, and also we talked about grouping and things like that. So I'm going to introduce a new sort of thing, align and distribute. When we were making um, our houses that we would make a lot, we wouldn't really care really exactly where the windows or the doors were in the house because um, it didn't really matter. We just sort of just sort of estimated it, eyeballed it and said, I think this is the middle. But it could be, it might not be. However, if you're working with a laser cutter, or if you're making a 3D object, if you're making sort of a machine or something, you're going to really want to know exactly where the pieces that you're making are, because let's say if this right here is a hole so that another object can fit through, and you have to have a few of these, you're going to need to know that this little hole is on the same place in all of those pieces so that it can make the piece better, so that the thing will actually fit through also. Um, so how do you actually do that? Well, um, what you want to do is you want to use your align and distribute tool. So how do you get to that? You can either press Control Shift A and it'll pop up right here, or it's also right here on the side. It looks like this. You can see it says Control Shift A right there. So this is your shortcut to get to it. Now, once you have this, you can basically give relationships to between different objects. So let's say if I have this object selected and I want to select this one in the back, I can, let's say I'll basically be arranging to the last selected object. I can arrange to the first selected, to the largest, to the smallest, to the page, to the drawing, to the selection. I can do all of that, but I'm going to keep it to the last selected. It's always good to basically develop an algorithm as far as what when you are arranging things, where do you arrange them to? Because let's say if I have this guy right here and I want to arrange him into the middle of this guy, and I want to know that he's going to move to the middle of this and not that this guy's going to move all the way out there and leave all these guys here. I don't want that. So it's always good to know, you know, how you do it, because I could do this first. I like to do mine as far as last selected. I like to select the thing that I want to arrange my first selected object to last. Like I want to arrange this guy to this guy. That's the way I think about it. But some people will say, okay, I want this to be my base object, and I want to pull in this guy. So then you would change this to first selected, and then I can select this guy first, and then I'll arrange it, and it'll still go to the center. So basically, how do we do this? Once you have your arrange and distribute tool, you can set a lot of relationships between different objects. You can let's say let's say center these objects on the vertical axis, just like this. So these guys are vertically centered. Let's say if this was right here, I want to center them along the vertical axis. I can center them like that, or I can center them along the horizontal axis. So now this thing is flat smack in the middle of my drawing. I can I can basically set these guys to the bottom. I can align the bottom edges right there. So now I know that this guy is at the base of this object. And this is important because let's say if I was measuring the height of this door or something like that, and I knew it was a certain height. If this were here or right here, and let's say this was white because I was doing my grouping, this shape is technically still the same, is still the height that I want it. But if I would go to cut it out on a laser cut or something, it wouldn't be, because as far as this is concerned, it's not. So you want to make sure that it's arranged, properly. Um, of course, you can arrange things to the side or to the outside. This right here actually arranges it to the outside. So this little yellow thing is the object that everything's being arranged to, and I'm just arranged everything to the outside of it, or right to the outside, flat against this that side of it. I can also arrange everything, to the inside, or just different things. You can do all that. Now, imagine if I had, let's say, I'm going to make some things. Let's say if I had a bunch of these guys. Let's say I'm going to duplicate this guy a bunch. Duplicate, duplicate. Now, let's say if I wanted to space all these guys out evenly. You see how I just duplicated this thing maybe 5 or 6 times. And if I were to move them out, let's say I want to move them evenly together, I could just move them all out. And, um, is that the end? I think that might be the end of them. Yeah, it's the end. And then I can, let's say if I wanted to align them along the horizontal axis, right there. Now I know that these guys are all level with each other. But now what if I wanted to space these guys out? Let's say if I wanted these guys to be spaced, evenly out. Well, what I can do is I can take these guys and I can do something down here. This is kind of important, especially if you're, making a lot of a single shape and you want to save space. Let's say if you're cutting on plywood or something like that, and you want to know that everything's spaced out. Or if you're making tabs, or just making lots of different things, this is very important. So you can distribute the centers equidistantly, horizontally, like this. So which this basically means is that these guys, the centers of these guys, have an equal distance between, let's say, this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. Now imagine if these things were different sizes. That would mean that this guy would actually be closer to this guy. If this guy is big and this guy is small, this guy would actually be closer to this guy because he's large, but his center is still has to be a certain distance away from him. So just be careful. You can also arrange them so that they are. So I'm actually going to show. I'm actually going to prove that point. Imagine if this was right here. Changing this color, send them to the bottom. I want to do the exact same thing I just did. So I'm going to arrange your centers. See how this guy is a lot closer to this object than this guy is to him. This is because the centers are equidistant, but that doesn't mean that the object itself is equidistant from the next object. So now let's say if I wanted everything to be equidistant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to click everything, or click the ones I want to arrange, and I'm going to click this one over here. This says make horizontal gaps between objects equal, and there we go. Now the distance between all these objects is the same. And there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can do everything vertically. You can scatter them along a page. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can remove the overlaps of objects to basically, if I have a lot of objects and I want to basically make them fit in a certain space or something like that, and you want to make sure that they're not overlapping, you can use this tool right here. This is pretty important. Alright, so now we've covered align and distribute. And by the way, if you're doing this align and distribute, especially if you're making something like this, it's always good to align first, and then you can group your objects back, and now you know that those geometries are stable and they're not going to change. We sort of already covered arrange. This is really simple. Let's say if I have all these objects sort of stacked up, let's change the color of this guy. Let's change the color of this guy right here to something else. And I want to, let's say I want to arrange these guys, but I want this guy to be in front. So I can just go over here and I can, bring him to the front, or put him down a couple layers, or do all of that that's how you operate that. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. We're just arranging things. It's not complex at all. Um, Snapping. We've already talked about this a little bit. This is a sort of an automatic arranging technique, or automatic aligning and distributing technique. Um, so basically, how the way this happens is that if I go over here and I have my and I put my snapping on, you basically get a bunch of options right here that basically let you know and lets you snap, or lets you basically have predetermined relationships between objects. So let's say if I have this one right here on that says it says snap from and to an item's rotational center. So let's say if I have this object right here, I want to move this guy toward to the middle of this object. If I put it close, let me see if I can get it close. Object rotational center. What did it say? It says supposed to say. I was trying to read it. So how about this one right here? So this basically centered the object to the midpoint of this other object, and it will sort of do that automatically. If you have this other, there are plenty of other ones, so you can basically um, um, center, or basically align this object right to the side of this object, or just align it to the path. You can align all kinds of things to all kinds of other shapes, and it basically makes things pretty easy to so you don't have to like zoom in and make sure that it's always a touching. I just wanted to touch at one point, but this is you can just put the corner to the path and just put it in the virtual position, and it'll basically say, hey, do you want it like this? Oh, and you say okay, yes, and guess what, now you have it like that. Snapping is pretty simple. There are all kinds of snapping options right there, as I said. You can try them all out, and they're all for sort of different uses. Some of them are similar to each other, and some of them are not. The next thing that we'll talk about in this video is object to path. This is just another little concept that we'll talk about. Imagine if I have this little object right here, and I'm gonna take my snapping off, and I want him to sort of flow along this star. Let's make him a little longer and a little shorter. I want him to sort of flow along this star. I want him to flow along the outside of the star. What I'll do is I'll take both of these, so make sure that he's in top, make sure that the one I want to follow, the one whose path I would like to follow with this object, I want him to be in the bottom. So make sure that if he's not arranged in that way, arrange him in that way. And I'm going to take these two objects. I'm going to go to extensions now, and I will go to generate from path, and you go to pattern along path. This is sort of this object to path sort of thing, and you'll have a couple of options. I can give a single, replica of this, or there are more that you can do. You can have different kinds of deformation types. You can have a snake, or you can have a ribbon, just sort of different kinds of things. Just play around with them. They're not that much different, but they're a little bit different. And then you have some different threshold you can have, like the space between the copies, the offset, and the different kinds of offset you can have. If I press apply, and now guess what happens? I have this object that is basically is sort of flowing along the edge of this this star. And you can see how since the paths cross, this is why it sort of subtracted this part, but it's fine. It's fine. This is just for demonstration purposes. And you can see the little object that I made. You can see how if it was longer, it could basically wrap completely around the this the star. This is pretty interesting if you're, let's say if you're trying to if you have a bunch of rectangles, let's say gears or something like that, and you're trying to get them to flow around, let's say a larger object or something like that. and you want to, basically add those geometries to that object, is pretty useful. Um, or if you're using text, you can actually do it with text. I'll talk about that in another video. And there's actually a text path that you can use to actually have your text actually flow along a prescribed geometry. Alright, this is the end of this video. I hope this was useful. We talked about aligning and distributing. We talked about arranging. We talked about snapping. We talked about this little object path thing as well. I guess I'll see you guys in the next video.